Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
So hello and welcome to today's session. This is a course showcase discussion on managing professional growth with presenters Tim Caffrey and Lisa Fagan. My name is Kim Heyer. I'm with GP Strategies, and I'm going to be your host for today's session. So before we get started, I just want to let everybody know that we will be sending a link to the recording today within 24 hours after this session ends, so that you'll be able to review it again or share it with your colleagues. So also, everybody, we do try to encourage that we make this as our time together so interactive, and encourage you to contribute to today's webinar. So if you have any comments during the presentation to share with the presenter and of course our other attendees that are on today, we encourage you to use the chat feature. But if you do have any specific questions for our presenters today, I ask that you use the Q&A option, and then that will allow us to respond to your questions either during the presentation or at the end of the webinar today, time permitted. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining today's session, and I'm really excited to introduce you to our presenters. Tim Caffrey is a consultant and a training facilitator with 30+ years of experience, helping organizations achieve their goals through engaged employees and trusted leadership. Tim works with primarily Fortune 1000 organizations in the fields of leadership, employee engagement, leading technical professionals, emotional intelligence, and conflict management. As a VP of GP Strategies, Lisa Fagan focuses providing clients with leadership development, employee engagement, coaching, and mentoring solutions. She's built and deployed growth strategies, managed global and national sales teams, designed and executed alliance programs, and she holds a bachelor's in marketing communications from Florida Southern College. We really have a great session planned for you with really some wonderful presenters. So with that, I'd like to hand it back over to our presenters to start the session.
Thank you, Kim. You're always wonderful about giving such a warm welcome to everyone. So hello, everybody. Again, Lisa Fagan here. And I just want to go, if we can, to the first slide, because my goal here as we prepare for Tim to take over is to share with you what we'll be covering over the next 45 minutes together. But let me first say to you that this is the first time that we're doing a showcase webinar, as opposed to just, a thought leadership webinar. The reason why we're doing this, there's actually two reasons why we're doing a showcase webinar. One is there's so much disruption going on in the workforce today, so much change happening relative to employees, whether or not they stay, whether or not they go, whether or not they're engaged. And secondly, this is the most asked about topic out of everything that we do from a leadership perspective from GP Strategies. This is the one topic, the one program that we get asked the most about. So we decided to do a showcase webinar, and at the end, we'll ask for your feedback on how valuable you found what we shared with you today. But over the next 45 minutes, what we'll talk about is what exactly is managing professional growth. So Tim will share with you how we define that, and then we'll go into talking about some of the key models that are in the program and what our process for managing professional growth is. So I would love to continue the energy that I see in the chat by asking you all to participate in a poll with me. So if we could go to the next slide, please. What this poll, let me start by sharing a personal story, and then we'll go right into the poll. You can feel free to answer the poll as we go. But just to kind of give you a little bit of level setting here, early on in my career, I had the opportunity to work for an organization that I was really excited about coming out of college, and they went through an organizational change. Through the course of that organizational change, they changed my role. I went to my manager and I was really confused about the responsibilities that I was being given, what I was being tasked to do. And basically his answer to me was, Lisa, just grow where you're planted. And I really didn't get much more guidance and direction beyond that. I did the best I could over the time that I was there, but to be honest with you, I just felt very disconnected from whatever the strategy was, whatever I was being asked to do. And ultimately, I ended up leaving that organization. I share that with you to say, if you have similar issues in your organization, if you're finding your employees leaving and you're not exactly sure why, whatever the issues are, we want to just get a gauge on that here. What are the pain points in your organization that you're seeing? And I'm seeing lots of folks respond in the chat, so thank you for that. I believe we want to give you about another 10 seconds or so to answer any other inputs. And if you don't see the issue or the pain point that you're experiencing here on the poll, please feel free to go ahead and put that into the chat for us. What Tim and I will do is we'll endeavor to address these issues as we go forward in the sharing around managing professional growth. So Kim, if you feel like we have allowed enough time here for the response, I'm happy for us to go to the next slide.
Okay, I'm going to end it now. Looks like everybody pretty much participated.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a real even spread of the responses. The only one that didn't get any nominations here was organizational alignment. So that's interesting. Some of the things that we hear, if we can go to the next slide, in addition to these different bullet points that you selected for the poll, here are some of the things that we hear from our customers. Voluntary turnover is huge. People are leaving and they're not necessarily informing us as to why. So this whole notion of quiet quitting has gotten a lot of airtime in the industry. I won't go through each of these, but I wanted to highlight that first one. I wanted to also highlight the last two. Mixed messages from leaders I find really interesting because oftentimes leaders feel that they're communicating clearly, but employees don't necessarily feel the same. So we're seeing that quite a bit as an issue. And then employees doing the bare minimum in their jobs. So we used to call this clock watching back in the day, but it is essentially someone that just comes in, does the bare minimum, and then leaves for the day. And what organizations are looking for is you putting forward that discretionary effort. So you're going to hear Tim talk about how do you get people to contribute at that level in the organization when he talks about the X model. So thank you for participating. Please keep the chat active with your questions, with your comments. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Tim.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And hi, everyone. So what is managing professional growth, or MPG as we refer to it? Well, it's 2 3-hour virtual instructor-led training modules. Who's it for? It could be for anybody. We have individuals at all levels of the organization participate in MPG. The process does involve, so people get the most out of it, some pre-work and some post-workshop follow-up. And in terms of the size of classes, typically we see about 20 people. Some of our clients have large organizations and they want to put more people through it. So we have classes of 25, even 30, but mostly it's around 20 people per class. And as far as MPG, what is it? You could say it's a workshop, but it's so much more than a workshop. People go through this process, and as was said at the beginning, I've been doing this a long time, and I have people come up to me in these workshops just telling me how much this has impacted not just their careers, but their lives and the way they look at things, and how it's changed their viewpoints and informed them of things they really weren't as aware of before. It's a proven process, and it drives individual and organizational success. It sends the message that accountability for growth and satisfaction really lies with the employee. So if you want to get results, you have the responsibility as the employee, but MPG provides people the structure and the ways and the means to be able to pursue being able to increase their satisfaction and growth. It is involving the manager. So there's robust developmental feedback that comes from each individual's manager, and they spend some time doing compelling values clarification. We'll talk about this more in just a little bit, but really, if people want to be happy in their jobs, if they want to feel a sense of satisfaction, they first have to know what it is they want. Some people know that and they clarify it. Some people are a little uncertain, and the exercises that we'll do help them to get clarity about What do I want? What's most important to me? Overall, I'll just say the process is employee driven, but supported by management and the individual's managers. Lisa made reference to the X model. So I want to share this with you because it really gets into the philosophy and the approach to increasing satisfaction and growth and employee engagement. So what you see on the screen here is a path. And on that path, you see the word organization, or at the base of it. Well, the organization, your organization, is working towards something. And if you think about it, what that something is in broad generic terms is success. Well, what do we mean by success? Well, every organization and every part of the organization has goals that they look to achieve. And there's also organizational values. What they might be in your organization could be integrity, could be safety, could be quality, customer satisfaction, but it's not enough to achieve the goal. We have to do so in a manner that's consistent with organizational values. And my guess is you probably have a strategy to achieve that. So why is it called the X model? Well, I'm going to introduce another path here. And on this path, we put the individual. This is every individual in the organization. They're all on their own personal path. So think of this as their personal path in life as a whole, and they're working towards something. And that something, again, is success. But when we talk about success now, we're talking about success that's defined by the individual's personal values, their personal goals, and it would be nice if they had a strategy to achieve those things. Now look at the intersection of the two paths, this diamond in the middle. If you think about it, what that diamond is, it's the job. And it's the basis for what I'll call a partnership, because both parties care about this job and both parties need each other. Think about it. The organization needs someone to do this job if they're going to achieve success. Well, the individual needs to have a job if they're going to achieve success. So we're both invested in this job. Well, shared investment, partnership, by definition, partnership implies give and take. One party gives to the other and they get something back in return. So let's take a closer look at the job and see what is it that each party wants. From an organizational standpoint, what do we want from employees? Well, working our way up the path here, since the diamond represents the framework of the job, at the top of that diamond on this path, we see the words maximum contribution. Organizations want to get the most that they can from their people. And when we say contribution, we mean contribution towards success as it's been defined. So that's what organizations are looking for. What does the individual want? Well, the individuals want maximum satisfaction. They want to get the most satisfaction out of their job that they can get. So going a little bit deeper into the job, let's think about what's going on in the workplace. So going back to the organization's path, I said that this line right here where my cursor is moving represents maximum contribution. That's your star employees. They're giving the most they can. But if you look closely at the diamond, you'll see there's some lines in there. And the lines are demonstrating that there are different levels of contribution. So if you look across the population, you might find that you've got people who are maximum contributors, but you probably have some people who are high-level contributors, maybe not maximum, but high-level contributors. And then we have individuals who are kind of in the middle here. They're doing the job, no more, no less, but they're right in the middle. And then below that line, we also have people who, well, whose contribution could be improved a bit. It's not really at where we need it to be. And it's even possible that you could have someone down here at the very minimum level of contribution. That's an extreme, but I'm just trying to illustrate the range of contribution. But it's a partnership. So let's go back over to the individual's path. We said that they'd love to be at the top of their path up here. Maximum satisfaction. I love my job. And there are people that are there. But just as there are individuals at different levels of contribution, if you look closely, you'll see individuals at different levels of satisfaction. I love my job. Then you could have someone here. Yeah, I like my job a lot. It's great. I change a few things, but all in all, it's a good job. Then you could have people who are kind of in the middle. It's a job. It's a means to an end. It's a paycheck. You could have people a little bit below that. Maybe they're a little disgruntled. Maybe they've experienced a lot of change in the last few years, and they're just uncertain about how they feel about things. And again, an extreme, but you could even go all the way down to the bottom. You could have individuals who are at the very minimum level of contribution. Now, I want to acknowledge that this is not a static model, meaning not everybody is in one place and that they stay there. People move around within this model. What makes them move? Well, it has to do with the communication that's taking place between them and their manager. So are we on the right path and are we where we need to be? Both in terms of my contribution, but in terms of my satisfaction. So people can be in different places within this diamond in the middle of the X. Here's someone that's sort of neutral. They're average contributor and kind of feeling okay about the job, but not great. Here's another person. They're feeling pretty good about the job. Their satisfaction's high, but their contribution, well, it's not really there. It's kind of low. How could someone get there? A variety of reasons. But one of them might be that they need some communication from their manager about what they're doing or what they should be doing. The opposite of that is an individual over here. And that's scary because that's one of your top employees, a maximum contributor. But if you look at the satisfaction, it's pretty low. And as Lisa was talking about earlier, this is where we're hearing this term, quiet quitting. Sometimes people just, their contribution begins to drop. They just aren't showing up, or worse yet, they actually leave the organization altogether. The message here is, where are your people at within the diamond? Ideally, if we have the right communication taking place and people are committed to one another, what we find is that we can move people to the ideal place on this diamond, which is up here at the top. I call that the apex, and we refer to it at GP Strategies as the point of engagement. That's when you have an engaged employee. Engaged employees are not just happy employees. There are people who are contributing to the success. And there are not just people who are high-level contributors, they're also people that enjoy their jobs, they're satisfied. Our belief is that these two things go hand in hand. It's hard for someone to be a top-level contributor if they're unhappy. And it's hard for somebody to be happy if they feel like they don't really make a difference to the organization. So how do we help people get there? Well, that's what the MPG process is about. So let's take a look at that. All right, so people want to go to these 2-3 hour virtual instructor-led trainings. Before that even happens, we begin this notion of partnership by offering a briefing both to the employee who will be attending the session, as well as to managers who will have the employee attending it. That's just so both of them are aware of what the process is and what their role is in the process. For the employee and the manager, there is some pre-work involved. The employee receives this pre-work about 2 weeks before the workshop. And what it entails is them doing an assessment of what's most important in my job. So there's an inventory of skills, and they rank each of the skills in terms of how important is this in my job and how effective do I think I am at it. And then they also go through another assessment, and that's an assessment of their values, to get clarification about what is most important to me, what drives me, what energizes me, what motivates me. So they'll go through some values exercises in their pre-work, knowing that they're going to continue that clarification process in the workshop. The manager, they don't do anything with the values, but they also do that assessment looking at the skills for the job and how effective, or what's most important to the job, and how effective they feel the employee is at those skills. Now, this feedback that they're providing is developmental in nature. This is not a performance review by any means. They're just saying, here's where I see where you're at now. Well, the two things get combined, meaning we look at the employee's point of view, the manager's point of view, and when they're combined, what happens is, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, something we call the feedback report. So the report is issued, and it takes all of the feedback and the self-assessment, and it compares, and it shows where both parties are in agreement about what's important to the job and where they might differ, and also where they're in agreement about the employee's skill level, but also where they differ. And then in the workshop, we'll use that that feedback report, and we work with the employees and they analyze the report and they look at, what do I want to discuss with my manager? What really surprises me in here? Or what am I most curious about in terms of their rating compared to mine? And they also look, of course, at their values and they think, what do I want to share with my manager that is important to my satisfaction? And talk about how that, what does that look like in the job? How can I create that satisfaction in the way that my job is structured? So what they put together is something we call the growth conversation. So they have, we call it a growth conversation planner, and the employee plans in the workshop everything that they want to discuss with their manager, incorporating their manager's feedback, and they put that into the growth conversation planner. And then within the first 2 weeks following the workshop, they have a conversation with their manager about both their effectiveness and contribution, as well as their job satisfaction.
Right. Tim, if I can interject there before you move
Yeah.
on. I did pop a question into the chat for all the participants. Just curious as to where you see your employees in terms of where they land, generally speaking, on the X model. Would love to see some conversation in the chat about that. And then in terms of this process, does your organization have anything like this that ultimately culminates in a growth conversation, manager to employee? So curious on those two fronts, if you all want to answer in the chat, just to keep the conversation going. All right. So we'll see if some answers come through here, Tim. But didn't want to interrupt your flow. I just wanted to offer folks an opportunity to chime in.
Sure, of course. I think that's whether you're doing it for this webinar, but I always find, let me just go back here for a second. I always find that this model, the X model, or the partnership model, as I like to refer to it, is just a great reflective tool to stop and think about where each of my people are on this. And then that informs me, if I'm the manager, what are the behaviors, what actions should I be taking to help move that person to the point of engagement? So it's a great question to think about where your people are at. What are the outcomes of this workshop? Well, there are many. First, there is alignment. Those conversations that managers and employees have with one another make sure we're on the same page. You know, I was surprised by your feedback, and it's different than when I assess something, and then we talk about it and realize, what does that skill mean to you? What does this aspect of my job look like? How am I doing this? And we make sure we have alignment about expectations. Of course, engagement, as I mentioned, this is a great conversation. This is where I hear this feedback. Managers saying, this is the best conversation I've ever had with my employees, and employees saying the same thing. What we find is people say, well, I wish our managers and employees would talk about these things. I don't think it's a lack of willingness. People say things like, oh, I don't have time to do that. I think what it is I don't know where to begin to have a conversation like this. So MPG provides the structure and the design to help people think about, what should we be talking about? And that's where you have these great conversations that lead to engagement. We make sure people know what they're accountable for in terms of their job. It gets that dialogue going, and it's a dialogue that now becomes ongoing. It's not just one event. We have this conversation. Now we know what we want to talk about. Out of it comes new ideas, sort of brainstorming between the manager and the employee. What would increase their satisfaction? How can they do this aspect of their job even more effectively? Ultimately, there's that word again, partnership, that we're working together to achieve this.
Yeah. So I have a question in the chat for you, Tim, that's come through. First of all, thanks everybody for the comments that you're putting into the chat. I'll just quickly highlight a couple of them. Stace says to us that organizations I work with don't have anything systematic beyond including developmental goals as part of their annual performance review process. It seems to be up to the individual leaders and employees to find time for these conversations. Yes, Stace, we see that quite a bit. So in alignment with you there. Then a question popped up from Martin. Actually from William, excuse me, Martin. Martin said he has he's in an organization where things are great. They've got employees and managers that talk to one another and they encourage those growth conversations. So that's wonderful. William says, I think the majority of their employees are in the middle of the X model. So going back to the X, how do I get them to move up to the apex? Any thoughts there, Tim?
Yeah, let me just back up a little bit here and go to our X just so we can, oh, there it is. If people are in the middle, remember the message that we said is that individuals are accountable for their own growth, satisfaction, and development. And it goes to what I said a moment ago. Oftentimes people say, I'm willing to do that, but where do I start? I don't know. So the values clarification process, it takes people very deep in terms of their reflection. What do I want out of my career? What do I want out of life, frankly? And how does my job impact that in a positive way? And they start to look at how they could increase their satisfaction. So now I've got something to talk about. But they also then are looking at the feedback from their manager compared to their own self-assessment. And now they've got something to say, well, this is how my manager views my contribution, and here's how I view it. Where are we the same? Where are we different? So that's why the conversation planner, this discussion plan, the feedback report, it helps people think, what do I want to talk about? It's very exciting because for many people, they've never even thought about talking to their manager about their job satisfaction. They just usually have performance reviews. So this is a chance to go in, and let me say, the growth conversation is driven by the employee. The employee decides what goes into it. The employee is the one that leads the conversation when they sit down with their manager. So that part of it is very exciting, that ownership.
Yeah.
And managers love this because they know that a big part of their job is to develop their employees. And now the employee has gone through this process and come back with a development plan and is sharing it with them. Well, at least with the basis for a development plan, and the two of them work together. But a lot of the legwork is done by the employee, and managers love that.
Yeah.
So that helps them move to that apex.
If we think about the story that I shared at the start of this session, Tim, you're giving me some thoughts about what I could have done differently as the employee. To be fair, I didn't come to that conversation with my then manager prepared to say, here's where I'm struggling. I just to ask a blanket question about trying to understand why through the organizational change I was moved to a different role. And so perhaps that manager wasn't really armed well to know how to respond to that in a way that would move me up the X, right?
Yeah.
So there was a true disconnect there. And, I think having the benefit of skills on both sides would have made that outcome a bit different.
Yes.
And so there's another comment in the chat here from Joan. Says, love that the employee owns their own development with this approach. So thanks for the feedback there, Joan. So if we go, then we can go to the outcome slide. I do want to share one thing that Tim has nicely gone through here and offered to you. What are the outcomes of the process that we see? What are we striving for when we go through this process with our clients? If we're ready, I'd love to shift over to the next slide, which we'll share with you just briefly some commentary that we've received from employees and managers who've been through this process. And it kind of aligns with what Joan is saying here. But the employee on the first quotation said, I had a great growth conversation experience. Before, I did not know what I wanted. So think back to my grow where you're planted story. I didn't know what I wanted.
Right.
Early in my career, right? I didn't know, but I kind of knew the job wasn't what I signed up for. But now I know what skills I have. My manager and I are going to work hard to improve my skills in order to reach my main goal. So there was that coming together and that alignment that came out of this particular person's conversation. And then the manager's feedback correspondingly was, this conversation helped me to address bad habits. Well, goodness. Did the employee even know they had bad habits until they had that conversation? And that they believe that it could have hindered that employee's growth and skill development. It's really good to ensure that the employee understood that job knowledge alone is not enough to grow. I mean, how many of us, love for you to put in the chat, how many of us advance in our careers based on tenure, based on time in role, and think that that is sufficient to grow within an organization? Please, I'd love to hear your responses to that question. And you can see here through the manager's response that from their perspective, that's not enough. You've got to know more. And they were able to calibrate with the employee accordingly through their growth conversations. So sharing that with you. I'd love to see any other comments and questions here in the chat. Tim, any other thoughts from you at this point?
No, I would just add, going back to what you said a moment ago, it's an opportunity that I think you have individuals who are motivated to want to get the most out of their jobs, their careers, and managers want to get the most of their people. Um, but it's the lack of where do I begin? How do I have that conversation? And the assessments really take things down to the bare bones. What is my job all about, and what do I really want? And from there grow some just tremendous conversations that both the employee, of course, benefits, but the manager benefits, and they feel great because they're doing their job and developing their people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's ultimately what our goal is through offering this process to our clients. I will also add here that we have a lot of data that comes out of the implementations with organizations that we've done in terms of bringing this process to them and enabling their managers and their employees to be able to have these growth conversations. We've given you a taster of what is central to the Managing Professional Growth process and program. But by no means is it all encompassing. It's not the entire program. But like I said, we've got lots of data from our employees, thankfully, who have shared feedback with us about how it has helped them. And always happy to share that with you if you have an interest. So we have another comment in the chat here. I had this similar thinking as an engineer in technical role that my skills are enough until I moved up to the managerial role. I realized I needed more than my technical skills to build and develop my team so I can get great benefit from the team. So great comment, William. Thank you. For now, I want to thank you for your time and attention. Tim, thank you so much for everything that you've done to prepare and share today. Kim, sure. I will hand over to you, my friend.
All right. Thank you, Lisa and Tim. It was a great discussion. And I want to thank everyone who joined today for your time and attention. At the end of the session, I do ask if you take a minute to fill out our survey. We'd love to hear your feedback and make things better. And we hope you will join us again for another one of our upcoming webinars. Visit GP Strategies website for future sessions. And I want to wish everyone on the call a wonderful and productive rest of your day. Again, thank you, Tim and Lisa, for your time. Great.
Thanks,
great
everyone.
Discussion.
Thanks, everybody.
This webinar was brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can access more webinars or download additional resources by visiting the GP Strategies Resource Library. The link is on your screen and in the description. Have a great day.